Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Sam's Healing Podcast. I am thrilled that you've joined us today. By now, many of you returning viewers have gotten used to a familiar face. His name is Max, and he's been coming in periodically and will continue to come in to share more about his story, his journey, and how he's making sense out of what is so hard to make sense out of. So, Max, how are you today, buddy?
I'm doing well, Sam. I'm glad to be back.
I think I speak for a ton of people that are glad that you're back as well, because what's interesting is that your story is resonating with the betrayed male, but also the betrayed female. Many betrayed females will message me on different platforms and say, look, you need to understand that there's a lot of what Max is saying that's resonating with us betrayed female. Well, yeah. And I've had some people reach out and say, look, man, if this is what you're doing, I'm all in. Let me help. And so I've had some really great dudes reach out and go, look, I resonate so much with Max's story. I wonder if people might resonate with my story. And my answer is, dude, bring it. Let's go. The more that we can rally together, the better. So as you've been answering comments on YouTube, you've been really trying to just meet people where they're at, which is one of the best things that we can do as helpers. What's that been like for you, just to talk with people and encourage them and see what they're walking through?
It's been amazing. I see so much of my own story in theirs. I see so much of the difficult road I had to walk in the path that is clearly before them. I remember there was one comment I responded to where I think it was a betrayed female who laid out pretty clearly the reasons that she decided she had to remove herself from the situation. It's exceptionally difficult. And I have a specific reason why it was difficult for me that might come up today. And I told her, and I know this to be true from my own experience, your decision to remove yourself from this situation, as you described it, was a healthy and empowering one. And I'm really, I'm rooting for all of you. I am cheering for you guys. When I chime in those comments, I know Sam can relate to this. Every fiber of my being is rallying behind you because I truly know where you're at, as Sam just mentioned. I really do. So keep the comments coming, and I appreciate the opportunity to chime in to the extent that it helps, and I'll keep doing that.
We talked off camera about some of the points that we're going to touch on today, and I'm going to go a little bit out of order because you just tapped into something that's so powerful, is that in all of this, male or female, we feel massively alone. Especially as an unfaithful, you feel alone because you don't know who to trust. You don't know who to tell your biggest failures to. You're going to get shame, condemnation, and despair and humiliation. And we talk a lot about that with my great buddy James on Ask the Unfaithful. If you're new, that's another podcast that I do. You can find that easily on YouTube. But we're talking primarily about the betrayed today. And it's very easy. But isn't it a little bit easier, unfortunately, for the betrayed male to feel an incredible sense of loneliness and that you are just on your own?
Oh, that's the hallmark of this experience, particularly for the betrayed male. And this is one that, yes, it's possible that the betrayed female could take something from this. But really, I do think you've hit, Sam, on something that makes the betrayed male's experience distinctive, which is, as you've said, and as was certainly my experience, when I was scouring the internet, scouring YouTube for material in this space, material that I had never thought I would myself have any reason to pursue, almost always it was from the perspective of the female. There's this prevailing narrative out there that that's mostly how those are the lines along which infidelity plays out. It's the man acting out on the woman and the woman having to put back together her shattered life. That lends itself to the aloneness that the man experiences. Then when you compound that, Sam, with some of the tendencies that we dudes have of really not having emotional discourse with one another, being and being afraid to be vulnerable with one another because that's not what again, for lack of a better word, that's not what we men can tend to associate with masculinity, right? So then you compound that with infidelity, which comes with all of the heaping doses of shame that you and I have unpacked together here in previous episodes. I mean, man, there's so much dread and fear and uncertainty and paranoia and terror involved in that. To have to tiptoe in the direction of a conversation like that means that you must find your safest people. You got to know right away who are your safest buddies. In your personal orbit, you have to find those people. It doesn't need to be many. I only had one truly safe, I would say two safe dudes in my orbit that I could really lean on. But then in addition to that, finding, if you can, that expert, that counselor, that therapist, that coach with expertise in the infidelity and in recovery space, that there's your other safe space to explore this and unpack this with someone who really knows what they're talking about. And Sam, you know intimately how I learned the hard way that working with a coach, a counselor, or a therapist with expertise in this area is so important. Because if you're just working with someone who is more of a general practitioner in the therapy space, that could do far more harm than good. And that is an experience that I certainly had. So, it's easy to feel alone as a betrayed male for the reasons I just laid out. That makes it all the more urgent to find your safe people. And those are the suggestions I have as to how to do that.
I think in many ways, you know intimately about what it means to be mishandled. I talk about this on both podcasts, that there's something called, you can say therapist-induced trauma. You can say helper-induced trauma. You can replace it with anything that you want. Call it authoritarian-induced trauma. The fact is, people who don't really understand this can really harm us as betrayed, also unfaithful. But that only adds to the loneliness, because you feel like if I tell this person, they're going to shame me, they're going to judge me, or I might just flippantly tell somebody and they just don't know how to handle it. So they say something stupid and then we feel even worse. Yeah. Do you feel like it can be a fight to even just make incremental decisions? When you're trying to navigate through this, I liken it to a boxing match. And Mike Tyson said something, whatever your opinion is on him, he said, everybody has a plan until you get punched in the face. Yep. And infidelity is an enormous punch in the face. It's a kick in the teeth. It's a kick everywhere. We won't even go into it. But have you felt like in the middle of this agony that you've had to develop your fighting muscles, you've had to develop your resilience and grit?
Oh, 100%. 100%. I've had to learn, I think this gets to the regressive tendencies that the experience of betrayal helped to bring to my consciousness, things I wasn't even aware of. Because what if I had to fight against? It wasn't just, my spouse's decision to essentially destroy the life that we had with two small children involved. But it was how the experience of betrayal for me triggered whatever you want to call them, these traumas from my background, things that helped illuminate for me the extent to which I had been practicing self-abandonment. The ways in which a lack of self-esteem, a lack of self-respect carried into my adulthood from my past, because I grew up in a violent, disordered environment in which my way of surviving was to crawl deep inside myself and hide there. So what did I have to fight, as you put it in that regard, Sam? I had to develop the toughness required to finally liberate myself from those tendencies, those regressive tendencies, that narrative that I had been imprisoned in since I was a 6-7-year-old kid with no ability to defend himself or process in any meaningful or helpful way. the disorderly, chaotic, dysfunctional nature of the environment in which I was being brought up. So, yes, I had to fight my way, and I'm still fighting my way out of those mindsets that are very dusty, very old things that I've carried with me for 35, 40 years. The experience of infidelity triggered that stuff and really made me more aware of them than ever before.
Absolutely. Let me ask you if this resonates with you. I have a client. Her and her husband work in the industry in Hollywood, and she's a writer, producer, what have you. And so when I first was talking to her, I said, let me see if this resonates with you. I said, infidelity is like a picture of this. It's a rider with no face, no name, in a dark suit on a black horse, riding into your life with an enormous amount of storms, with lightning, thunder, whatever's dark, whatever's depressive. That's what it looks like. And the rider on this horse, the infidelity rider on the infidelity horse, has a lasso. And the thing about infidelity is it lassos all of your other unresolved childhood wounds and pains, all of your family issues, all of your childhood abandonment. It lassos all of that stuff together, brings it with it, and says, we've come to destroy you. Yeah. I said that to this producer writer, and she was like, I've never forgotten that picture that you gave me. Is that what it was like for you?
Listen, absolutely, 100%. It comes out of nowhere. Even if you have your suspicions, to confirm through discovery that it's real is a totally different level of awareness of the situation. Okay? And that's the point at which everything you thought you understood about yourself, everything you thought you knew about the life you were living gets completely turned upside down and thrown into complete unfathomable disorder. And the way I think about that situation for me with respect to fighting my way through that, I'm a guy who loves Vietnam War history. I've read a lot about it. It's close to my heart. And so I think about myself figuratively as I'm fighting this battle, trying to climb up a muddy hill in the steamy jungles of Vietnam with a knife in my teeth, hearing the bullets whiz by me that are intended for me, by the way, to take me out. And I'm just clawing my way up one hand at a time to find my way to the top of that muddy hill, man, because yes, that's what the dark horse that rode into my life was, a horse of complete and utter oblivion. And nothing is spared. Everything is on the table for destruction. And so that's why you have to bring this, lastly, this fighting mentality, this warrior mentality, as you used to put it with me, Sam, because you're having to build yourself back up from scratch. I am becoming a completely new, different person. I was just thinking about this yesterday, shocked at this realization about myself, and yet rather excited about it too. The more time goes on, the more excited I am to look ahead to a totally different future than the one I imagined for myself.
Why was it shocking? Now, we could probably go on YouTube or Instagram and find 10 trainers, motivational speakers, coaches. Yeah. You can be, and we would just go, bleh. No offense Absolutely. To that. No offense to the industry. No offense to anybody who's trying to do that. That's we're talking about a horse that comes into town that you never want to see coming to town. It takes a little bit longer for us to be able to get back up on our feet again. Why is it shocking? And we didn't even talk about this, but why is it shocking that you are starting to actually like who this new person is becoming and showing himself to be?
Yeah, when people come at me with slogans that feel like toxic positivity, like, well, you'll find someone, and I think right now, I need to find myself. Okay, that's who I got to find first, right? And then maybe I pull someone else into this S show that I've got going on, but first let me find myself a little bit. And so that's part of perhaps what shocks me is this. You're thrust into this circumstance in which you have to just establish a narrative that in no way resembles the one that you thought you were signing up for when you exchanged vows with your spouse. Okay.
Right. Right.
And I came to believe, and I think to some extent, those codependent, self-abandoning tendencies, those regressive tendencies I was just talking about, come into play. I was clinging to this relationship, and in fighting for my marriage, there were some toxic aspects of that fight for my marriage, which might have seemed valiant from the outside looking in, and perhaps in some respects it was. I had two small children I was fighting for. But in another way, I was clinging to something just because there was a part of me that probably felt like I would never survive without it. I would never find someone else. I now know that this concern about finding someone else is irrelevant. What you need to do is find yourself first, and come what may. So when you do the work of reshaping your being, as you must in the aftermath of infidelity, you are becoming a person who may, in fact, stand a better chance of attracting the kind of people that that could really be healing and supportive presences and empowering presences in your life. Back then, before D-Day, Sam, I can look back now and see who I was. I was, just in basic ways, I'm in the best physical shape of my life than I've ever been, okay? In the last 2 years, that is one of the ways in which I have been shocked by what's possible for me. I can't tell you how thrilled I am. I mean, I've shed all sorts of weight physically. I've never looked or felt the way I look or feel now. And so these are the ways in which, I just sort of shock myself into realizing how much power I actually had. Power that felt like it had been removed from my life on and after D-Day. But the experience of successfully reclaiming your power can be restorative, empowering, but yes, shocking in my case, because this is a capacity I did not see in myself before D-Day, and certainly not in the immediate aftermath of it.
I interviewed a woman just recently who she said something, and I made it the tagline for the podcast. She said, "I'm so much stronger than I thought I was." And so many betrayeds who are somewhere between 2 and 5 years out, male and female, come to that place where they say, man, I didn't know I was this strong. I didn't know I was this powerful. But not everybody gets to that point. I've met people who are 10, 15 years down the road. I have people message me all day long who are 10 years removed, and they're like, I'm still struggling with depression, hopelessness, despair. So you and I talked about this concept of leaning in, and there's 1,000 memes an hour about leaning in and sit with it and all of that. But when you're dealing with infidelity, there is the concept of, I've got to lean into this. What did that really mean for you, leaning in? Was it that you struggled with denial? Did you feel like this is too much for me? Was it just like, this can't be happening to me? What were your thoughts that brought you to the point where you finally had to go, dude, I have to accept this, lean in, and get to work?
Yeah, there's a book by a Buddhist nun named Pema Chodron I think it's called When Things Fall Apart, that blew my mind. I've read it several times, and she talks a lot about this and does it with a brilliance that I find to be just breathtaking. And she says this, you know, we spend so much of our lives hoping for some dreamed of future outcome to come about. And so we remove ourselves from the present moment through this facility of hope, whereby we thrust ourselves into some dreamed of future. We flee, she talks about, from discomfort constantly. We distract ourselves, we stuff it down, we deny it. We numb ourselves, right? We whatever mode it is that we choose to run from ourselves. Yes, I struggled with those things. I didn't want this to be true. I wanted to deny it. I didn't want to believe that my spouse was capable of the things that I clearly could see from the evidence that I found she was in fact capable of. I didn't want to believe that this happens to me.
Right.
This doesn't happen to me. Okay. This is someone else's story. This ain't my story. What are you talking about? You know?
Right.
So yeah, I mean, that was a big part of it for me. And what did leaning into it mean for me? It meant feeling it as in all its awful darkness, letting it in, sitting with it, living with it. You have said, and I've encountered this idea a lot, in this space. The only way through it is through it. I had to reluctantly accept that there are no handy detour signs pointing my way around this thing. I just had to drive straight through the construction zone and find my way out to the other side. It is not fun. This is why, real quick, Sam, one of the points I want to emphasize with betrayed males, and this is something that betrayed females can relate to as well. You are in the fight of your life. You did not ask for this fight, but you have to lean into and embrace this fight because it's a fight for your survival. There's no other way about it. And it's going to take a long time. As I was talking with Sam off camera before we started, I'm a couple years into this journey. Am I complete with this journey? Hell no.
Right.
Not even close. But man, have I come a long way? Hell yeah, I know that. And how have I come a long way? Because I did make this conscious decision at some point to accept what happened, that there's nothing I can do to change what's already been done. And therefore I must grapple with this and find my way through it, not try to find my way around it. Because then when you're trying to find your way around it, you're delaying the pain. You're not getting rid of it. It will find you eventually, or it'll linger with you in its own ways throughout the rest of your life. I encountered a couple at the marital seminar I went to a couple years ago that was dealing with an infidelity event that had occurred, I think, 50 to 60 years ago. I'm not exaggerating. You can ask Rick about this.
Right.
He'll remember. I couldn't believe it. And why was that the case? Because the male spouse who was betrayed in this arrangement told me. I talked with him face to face about it. He told me that he just sort of let it go. He kind of, stared the beast in the eyes for 5 minutes, and then to keep the peace, to prolong this comfort zone that his marriage embodied, swept it under the rug and moved forward. And what happened? 60 years later, they're at a marital seminar addressing this thing that happened that long ago.
It really is a principle that I tell clients. I say it every day. I don't say it every session, but the reality is that we can only stuff things down for so long before they're going to come out sideways. A lot of people don't understand. They try and stuff it down. They try and avoid it. And if you don't process it now, you're going to process it in between 6 to 12 months. And you're going to process it because you're going to be dealing with a massive amount of collateral damage, because what we don't process festers. And a lot of times, I'm sure there's many betrayeds out there who will say, yeah, I didn't deal with it. And then 6, 8, 9 months, I thought I had dealt with it. And the anger, the rage just showed up out of nowhere. And for people of faith, this is even more challenging because we think, I need to forgive. I got to honor Jesus or whatever character we're worshiping. I got to honor Jesus or honor God or whatever the divinity is. I got to forgive. And so we don't grieve. We just slap a Band-Aid of forgiveness on it. And then in 6 to 12 months, we're dealing with all this anger, all this rage. And we're like, oh my gosh, I'm a bad Christian, or I'm a bad spiritual follower because I said I forgave, but I really didn't. Now I lied to God. And so they struggle with all this other condemnation. And it's just like, look, you can't just stuff it down. You have to work through it, and the right person can help you work through it. As we kind of wind down today, you said something that was really powerful off camera about dealing with the ruminations, and that those ruminations were incredibly seductive, trying to just reel
Great
you.
Word for it. Yeah.
And that's the thing about ruminations, is they are seductive. What was it like for you to finally get a handle on the ruminations and not keep going down the rabbit hole? Not because you wanted to, not because you were just, oh, sign me up for this, but they were so powerful and enticing to you, right?
Here's the thing. There was someone on line who works as a divorce coach for men, and one day she said something that I'll never forget. It was, she looked at the camera and she said, "The why is not what you need. The why is not what you need." And I ruminated searching desperately for the why in my mind. Why did my spouse do this? Well, what are the most common tendencies that are the outcomes of that kind of rumination? A, you're going to decide it's your fault. You're finding why. If I hadn't have raged in this moment, if I had just not complained about, doing the dishes the way she wanted me to load them onto the dishwasher that one night, or whatever ridiculous thing it is, right? Or you will decide to demonize and vilify your spouse. And guess what? That's no more helpful than blaming yourself. In my view, and I'll put this in strong terms, both options are a waste of your time. And what I would suggest replacing that rumination as to the why with is an acceptance that you may never come to this one grand answer as to why your spouse did this. You might be brought closer to the why, if indeed it's that necessary, with an expert therapist, coach, or counselor who has experience with addiction and affair recovery. But I jotted down some questions that could replace the kinds of questions you ask yourself as to the why. Who were you as a person before discovery? Who are you now? How or why has the experience of betrayal changed you? What tendencies does this reveal about you, your character, your regressive behaviors or mindsets, your self-limiting or self-loathing thoughts, the childhood traumas this experience has triggered? What are you learning about yourself? Bring a curiosity to your grief. That provides you with a much more expansive terrain to explore that could be much more healing than constantly, as you said, the seductive nature of that, indulging that rumination as to, well, why did she do this? Well, how did I screw up to make her do this thing? Or how could she possibly do this? What an awful person. I married the wrong person, right? We tell ourselves, right. Or my spouse is a narcissist, right? There's always this, also that too. And that's not helpful, man. Bring curiosity to your grief. See what you find out about yourself. The more you heal yourself, the better a chance, in my view, the relationship stands of healing.
I think it's a brilliant statement. The more that we heal us, the lens gets bigger, right? The viewpoint that we have gets larger. And I think for you, you said this last episode, and I think some people were like, oh, that's right. You're still in the middle of the throes of healing. You're still in the middle of moving forward, learning how to do life with two small kids in a post-infidelity, post-divorce life. And I think anybody that listens would say, it doesn't sound like it. It sounds like my man should be writing books on this, and it sounds like my man Max should be traveling the world telling his story. But this is a picture of when we channel our inner warrior and we decide to lean in and say, okay, I've come to a point of acceptance and I can accept where I'm at, and now I can do work. Until we can accept where we are at, we can never get to where we want to be. And I think it's a fantastic understanding that you are accepting where you're at, and that was the gateway to doing work.
Oh, it felt so good, Sam, to accept rather than to resist. What a weight. I could breathe. Oh my God, it was so relieving.
So what else would you say in our final thought today? As you've got someone out there that's like, no, I can't accept it. I can't admit, no, it's too much. And we've heard it all. But as a reminder to those who are in this real-time pain, it's too much. I can't believe it. I don't want to accept it. It's too painful. It just incapacitates. As we just sit here and we hear those things come through our brain, what's your thought for those that are wrestling with that? Because this isn't just bankruptcy. This isn't just a health issue. This isn't just, oh man, we've got to move, a job change. I mean, this is life-altering trauma. What would you say to that person that's in their car at home just going, no, I just can't accept it?
Yeah, there are many ways in which a refusal or resistance to acceptance will play out in destructive ways in your life. Okay, I'll just give a couple of examples. And you know this one backwards and forwards, Sam. I know it by heart now. I love it. This phrase, pain that is not transformed is transmitted. You don't transform that pain into something restorative, something empowering. You're going to transmit it. And sometimes it's not just about you, buddy. The way you're going to transmit that pain is going to harm those who are trying to love you. Okay, so we're not just talking about you here. In my case, I have kids. And if daddy has not processed his own pain enough to not take it out on his kids, at times when they have nothing to do with this at all.
Right.
That sucks. And so that's on me. And these are the stakes, man. And it's not just about you. I mean, you gotta process this pain for those around you, for those who are depending on you, or those who love you. One real quick last example, Sam, of the consequences of refusing to accept it is, I have a very good friend in town, very successful guy who went through a divorce that destroyed him. His wife filed for divorce. And he's a very macho, masculine dude who's, he's going to figure this out real quick. And like we said, that Home Depot analogy a couple episodes ago, and he's going to read all these self-help books and listen to this stuff. And that's it. I'm good. I'm going to go back out into the dating world. Right. And he was like, he flipped the switch from being on the ground, gutted with pain, I'm trying to talk this guy off the floor, okay, to all of a sudden he's found the love of his life and he's traveling the world with her, and it's all just great. Well, guess how long that lasted? About 4 months. And
Yep.
when it was over, I watched him experience that same grief all over again, except in my view, it seemed like it was taking an even harder, darker toll on him the second time around. And what did I derive from that? I realized he rushed himself into a relationship as a way of fleeing from the pain that the dissolution of his marriage caused him. That wasn't the answer. He had to lean into it, as we've been saying. He had to sit with it. And that's why, in my case, probably to a fault, okay, I am really not in any kind of rush to go there right now. I need to figure myself out, put myself back together. And it's entirely possible. I do believe that the better a job I do of putting myself back together, getting back in touch with who is my authentic self at its core, that's when I have a chance at maybe finding a new life with someone else down the line. Am I rushing into that? No way, especially not after seeing what my friend just went through.
Well, I think it's a great point. And for those of you that are really trying to wrap your mind around this beast, as you've seen the horse come into town with the lasso that has pulled up every unhealed area of your life, take it from Max, take it from me. And there's hundreds and thousands of men and women out there who have survived infidelity and have either restored their relationship or have restored themselves and found new relationships and have experienced a life that is rewarding, fulfilling, and, believe it or not, joyful. If I can help in any way, feel free to reach out to me at samshealingpodcast@gmail.com. You can leave a leave a comment, like and follow. I'd love for you to subscribe. Max will be floating around the comments as well. Max, it's always a pleasure. And again, you'll be back very soon. So as we say goodbye today, the one thing I'm going to tell you, it might be easy to give up on your marriage because it's in such disarray. It might be hard, but the number one thing on behalf of Max and myself is don't give up on you. Because when you give up on you, everything becomes harder.
Yeah.
So keep going one day at a time. And remember, you never know the end of a story by the beginning or the middle. And you might be in the middle of it, but you don't know the end yet. You don't know the end of you, of your family, of your situation. So we'll see you next time on Sam's Healing Podcast.